Hello, young people. This is the second video of Chapter 1, Lesson 2. And this video is about system interactions, how systems work together and how they interact. So a couple of system basics, basic things about systems. When we are describing a system, we pay attention to a few things. We pay attention to inputs and outputs. So that means what goes into the system and some stuff happens, and what goes out of the system after that stuff happens. Another thing that we pay attention to with systems is the boundaries of a system. What is part of that system and what is not part of that system. And boundaries of different systems, because remember in the last video we said that a big system can be made up of smaller systems. And for our purposes, for today, our big system is the whole Earth. And our smaller systems, we went over in our last videos, are the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, the geosphere, and the biosphere. More details about those later. Those are subsystems. The atmosphere can be thought of as a system of its own, but it's also part of the system that we call Earth. So those system boundaries oftentimes can overlap and they can interact. Overlap and interact. What's the difference? When two systems interact, there's a change in one system and it causes a change in a different system. When two systems overlap, there's a part of system A that could maybe also be considered a part of system B. So, interaction, system 1, system 2, overlap. There's a little bit of wiggle room there where something could be considered part of two systems at the same time. All right, so quickly we're going to go through the four main subsystems of the big system that is Earth, and maybe talk a little bit about how they overlap and interact. So the first one, if we're talking about Earth, then maybe the first one should be the geosphere. Geosphere. We talked about that last video, or not last video, but the last series of videos from 1.1. Geosphere is all of the solid and liquid rock on Earth. It is the melted and solid metals of the core of the Earth. It's also soil. It's also sand. It's also gravel. The geosphere is the mountains and the beaches and the deserts and the hills and the cliffs. Geosphere. It's not alive, it's not wet, and you can't breathe it. It's the geosphere. Remember the hydrosphere, that's all the water on Earth. The atmosphere is all the gases on Earth, and the biosphere is everything living on the Earth. Pardon me. So how does the geosphere interact with the other spheres, with the other subsystems of the Earth? Well, the geosphere, one of the things about the geosphere is, say, the shape of mountains and cliffs and hills and the shape of the ocean floor. So How does it interact with the hydrosphere? Well, if you have an underwater mountain range or an underwater canyon, that's the shape of the rocks under the water, that's going to affect water currents. That's going to affect the way that ocean water flows. That's an interaction. How does the geosphere interact with the atmosphere? Same deal, only with the wind. If you have a really tall mountain range, it's going to change the way the wind blows. How about how the geosphere interacts with the biosphere? Interacting. Well, think about living things that you know. The geosphere causes or sort of sets the boundaries for where living things can live. Doesn't it? Only certain kinds of plants can live on cliffs. Only, certain animals live in caves, and they don't live anywhere else. Fungi live in certain places and not other places, and that's affected by the geosphere. That's sort of the rules are made by the geosphere. Okay. How about how they overlap? How does the geosphere overlap with the hydrosphere? Earth, water, where's the gray area? Where do those things kind of overlap? Took my notes too small. Squint. Well, here's one way that the geosphere and the hydrosphere overlap. There are certain minerals, we'll get to minerals later, there are certain minerals that make up rocks that actually contain water in them. There's actually molecular water inside minerals. Not all minerals, but some minerals. It's a mineral, so it's part of the geosphere. It's got water, so it's part of the hydrosphere. They overlap. Geosphere and atmosphere, how do those overlap? Well, there's dust and smoke, especially right now, The air is terrible. There is dust and smoke trapped in the atmosphere. That dust and smoke, those particles are part of the geosphere, but they're also kind of part of the atmosphere. And the geosphere and the biosphere, how do those overlap? Well, you got bacteria, decomposers, worms, stuff like that live in soils. Soil is part of the geosphere, but those organisms are part of the soil, so there's some overlap right there. Moving right along, the hydrosphere. The hydrosphere is water, all the water on Earth. The hydrosphere is all the water on Earth. It's liquid water, it's solid water. Solid water, where's solid water? How about glaciers? How about ice caps? It's gaseous water. Where's the gaseous water? Clouds, yo. Oceans, lakes, rivers, irrigation ditches, glaciers, underground aquifers, it's all part of the hydrosphere. How do those interact? Interact, meaning one thing affects the other. How does the hydrosphere and the atmosphere interact? Well, carbon dioxide transfers from the water to the air, and from the air to the water. It's matter, it moves between these systems. How does the hydrosphere interact with the biosphere? Well, obviously we've got animals and plants that live in the water. We already talked about how it interacts with the geosphere, those ocean currents. How does it overlap? How does the hydrosphere overlap? Where are the lines blurred? Well, the hydrosphere and the atmosphere, clouds are a great example of how those two things overlap. Clouds are kind of part of the atmosphere, but they're also made of water. Easy peasy. How about the atmosphere? The atmosphere is all of the gases and particles that are surrounding the Earth. Gravity is holding it to the Earth. The atmosphere interacts with the hydrosphere. We already talked about that. CO2 transfer, carbon dioxide transfer. Interacts with the geosphere with wind. The geosphere, the shape of the mountains and the land, directs the wind. That's how the wind works. The atmosphere interacts with the biosphere in so many ways. You and I need to breathe. Plants need to photosynthesize. Those are interactions. How about overlap? Where does the atmosphere overlap with the hydrosphere? We talked about it. Clouds. Where does the atmosphere overlap with the geosphere? We talked about it. Dust, smoke, particles from the Earth that are suspended in the atmosphere and blowing around. How does the atmosphere overlap with the biosphere? Well, along with those particles of dust and smoke, there's bacteria that blow around in the atmosphere. Heck, we're in the middle of a pandemic. That's why I'm giving you this lesson over a video. COVID-19 virus interacts with the hydrosphere. It's suspended in these little droplets that are suspended in the atmosphere. So COVID-19 interacts with both the atmosphere and the hydrosphere. Finally, how about the biosphere? That's all of life and every living thing. Well, I think we kind of covered how the biosphere interacts with the other spheres. This video is getting long. Dang it. Sorry. Just a couple of things. A couple of other big Earth systems that some people and some scientists talk about. The cryosphere is a term that means all of the ice and frozen stuff on Earth. So that's going to be your ice caps, your glaciers, snow. And the other big Earth system that some scientists are starting to refer to is called the pardon me, let me say this right. Anthroposphere. Did you like that? Anthroposphere. One more time. Anthroposphere. The anthro means human. And so the anthroposphere, it's a hard word to say, man. It means any part of the Earth that has been changed or affected by humans. Think cities, think farms, think mines, pollution in the atmosphere, the irrigation ditch that brings water to the Wahluke Slope. It's all part of the anthroposphere. All right, those are systems and system interactions. My video here went a little long, 14 minutes, I'm sorry. Next video is going to be about modeling. We will see you there.